Please take a seat, and we're going to start with a video.
Jag vill se en framtid.
Jag ser för mig att
min vision är
där vi genom ansvarsfulla samarbeten hittat sätt att arbeta mot klimatkrisen med unga i spetsen och klimaträttvisa i fokus.
I hverdagen etter den grønne omstillingen så kan jeg sykle til jobb og høre fuglene kvitre og humlene suse.
at vi bliver bedre til at tænke over, hvad det egentlig vil sige at leve godt. Jeg håber, at vi i fremtiden bliver bedre til at sætte pris på et stabilt klima, en sprudlende biodiversitet, frisk luft og liv i havene.
Ympäristökriisit aiheuttaa nälänhätää, ääriilmiöitä ja sotia. Mun visio paremmasta huomisesta on maailma ilman näitä.
Ég sé fyrir mér að árið 2050 mun umhverfisvænt daglegt líf einkennast af víðamikilli innleiðingu á endurnýjanlegum orkugjöfum. Hringrásarhagkerfið verður einnig innleitt að mestu leyti och till att minska sóun och hámarka auðlindanotkun.
Min fråga till beslutsfattare är: hur planerar ni att genomföra den gröna omställningen på ett ansvarsfullt sätt som tar hänsyn till urfolks rättigheter?
Hvordan vil du sikre at jeg kan leve i en sunn og grønn by?
Me tiedetään, että meidän ympäristötoimet on täysin riittämättömiä parhaankin tieteellisen tiedon valossa. Siispä kysynkin teiltä, miten niin me ei muka voida tehdä tarvittavia toimia maapallon pelastamiseksi?
Beautiful. Yes. This short movie was UN youth delegates who were sharing their vision for the future. Very, very beautiful. And we will now move into the session of youth. It's time to talk about what impacts youth, young people lifestyle choices. And it will be a very inspiring, empowering session. We have a lot of insights packed into this session. So we're going to start with a few short presentations to give us a few stats of the current situation. So without further ado, I want to welcome two of our first speakers up on stage. It is Johanna Göransson, who is an expert on lifestyle and consumer behavior at Ungdomsbarometern, and I will also at the same time welcome up on stage Jimmy Sand, who is analyst at Nordic Information on Gender. Give them a hand, please. Johanna, I think it's you that's going to start. Jimmy, if you want to take a seat here while in the meantime, or wherever you feel comfortable. And I'll leave the floor up to you.
Thank you so much, Åsa. Does everybody hear me all right? Good, perfect. Thank you. And thank you, Åsa, and everyone at Nordradio for this fantastic event. I feel so inspired that I sort of lost track about the fact that I was supposed to talk today and what I was supposed to talk about. And I think it's so fantastic that we've been talking so much about young people, because that is my favorite subject, as you might have guessed. I come from Ungdomsbarometern, as we are known in Sweden, or the Swedish Youth Barometer. We do the largest annual youth survey in Sweden with approximately 15,000 respondents each year, where we ask questions about everything from education choices, work-life values, to sort of what would you like to have for breakfast, or consumption choices, or financial choices, or anything like that. So we have a pretty good idea about what the youth of today think and feel and how they behave, and that's what I'm here to talk about today. So we are, of course, talking about sustainability, and talking about young people and sustainability is actually quite complex and nuanced. I know we have had a lot of speakers here today touching upon the subject of young people and sustainability, and it's quite easy to sort of fall into this characterization that this next generation, or the young generation, is sort of the saviors of our time, that they are more sustainable, they value sustainability more, and they act more sustainable. And I think this is something that we have to have sort of a reality check on. We know, of course, that young people care a lot about sustainability today. About half of young people worry about having a sustainable lifestyle every week. So it's a topic that has very high awareness among young people today. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's something that changes their consumer behavior or that it takes up a lot of space in their consumer behavior today. And I wanted to showcase this, what I mean, with sort of a concrete example. We've touched a little bit upon it today, and it's of course ultra fast fashion or these low cost players in the e-commerce field like Shein and Temu. I'm sure you all know of them. Last year in our survey, we asked young people, how would you describe your attitude towards these low-cost e-commerce players like Shein, Temu, Amazon, Wish? And as you see here, we have quite negative attitudes towards these low-cost players. We've asked follow-up questions to those who have these negative attitudes, and what we hear is that there are a lot of concerns about their practices. The young people feel like they are not environmental, that they have a high climate impact. There are also a lot of concerns about the ethical standards that they operate with. There's a concern about child labor. However, what we see here on the left is the share of people who have ordered from a low-price website. So what we have here is quite clearly an attitude behavior gap, where we see that young people are concerned about the ethical and the environmental problems of these players in the e-commerce field, but we also see that they choose to shop from them even if they have these attitudes. So how does this work? What are the drivers that create this gap between attitude and behavior? And what we see increasingly is driving young consumer behavior right now is affordability. There's a huge focus on price among young consumer, and right now we see that price is sort of taking over sustainability in how young people make their consumer choices. And of course, this is sort of a wet blanket on the discussions that we've had today, but it's very important to not make assumptions about how young consumers behave, to know where we are starting at. And to explain this or to understand what sort of context this is happening in, we need to look at the interests of young people. We need to look at what their concerns are, what are they worrying about right now. If we look at the graphs behind me here, we see the interest for environmental and climate issues, and we see the interest for fashion and clothes among young people, and we see how that development has been over almost the last 20 years. Looking at the climate interest, we see a peak here in around 2018. Does anyone think they can find an explanation for that or know what happened in around 2018? We've talked about it on the stage here before. We of course call it the Greta effect, and when Greta came around, a lot of people wanted to talk about Generation Z, as we call them, as Generation Greta. But since then, something has happened. We've seen that the interest for climate issues has started to decline among young people today, and that isn't unnatural. A lot of things has happened in our society over the last couple of years. We've had a global pandemic, we've had wars broken out, we've had an economic stability. So when we look about what young people are concerned about today, they are concerned about the climate crisis, they are concerned about having a sustainable lifestyle, but more people today, and becoming more and more, are concerned about their finances. And that's what's taking a bigger role in their consumer behavior today. We've also had a lot of people on this stage talking about culture and culture's role in our society today, and the role of culture in driving the green transition. So I wanted to touch a little bit of what is creating culture, or the cultural context that young people are influenced by today. And of course, a huge chunk of young people's media consumption is social media. It happens on social media, and we do ask questions in our survey about what aspects of life young people feel social media affects. And what we see at the top here is what I buy. That is the #1 effect that social media has on young people. And this sort of tells the story about what kind of culture that young people live in. And it's quite easy to call it a culture of consumption. And consumption really has become a form of entertainment today. When you go on social media, there is, of course, news. There is, of course, a lot of funny videos, animal videos, but there's also a lot of content that is about showcasing what you consume or encouraging other people to consume things. And that has taken a much larger role of the kind of what young people are exposed to today. And that, of course, also plays a huge role in informing consumer behavior. We also know that 6 out of 10 young people follow brands on social media. So brands have a very direct access to young people today. They have very direct access to encouraging them to consume things. Of course, there are brands and people who reach out who also have positive things to say and have a positive impact on sustainable consumption behaviors. But we know that the platform that young people consume media on is very consumer focused. I wanted to finish this very short insight into young consumer behavior today with talking a little bit about brands and what young people see as a sustainable brand today. So the 2 graphs that I have behind me is to the left, the brands that young people would like to collaborate with if they were an influencer. So you could sort of call that young people's favorite brands or brands that they would like to associate themselves with. To the right, we have the brands that young people, when they are asked spontaneously, can you say something, a brand that feels sustainable to you? Those are the brands that we see. And it's very interesting that the top 3 brands, ICA, Nike, and Apple, when asked to mention sustainable brands, are not brands that most people would probably say, oh, this is the most sustainable brand that I know. So it sort of tells us that young people's understanding or perception of what a sustainable commercial player is also quite it's created on a superficial level. So maybe Nike feels sustainable because they do a lot of work with social justice, which of course is very important. They are also very connected to sports and therefore have a strong association to health, which also feels sustainable. ICA is a big commercial player in the food sector, and food is very closely tied to sustainability, so they also feel sustainable. Apple is very closely related to technological innovation, and that also feels sustainable. So that is sort of the basis of what young people perceive to be sustainable consumer behavior. It's also very interesting to note the similarities between these 2 graphs, that the brands that young people like and that they would like to associate themselves with, it's also the brands that they perceive to be sustainable. And this is something that you can very easily see in when you do a lot of surveys, that people want to think that the choices that they make are good choices and sustainable choices are good choices. But it also tells us that, sort of speaks to the expectations young people have on companies today. They think that if they like a company, that company must be good and that company must be sustainable, and then you're maybe not prone to do more research or do a deeper thought process into what you're buying. But it also, when we speak to young people, we do not only surveys, but we do a lot of focus groups and in-depth interviews in the work that we do. And we also hear young people talking about sustainability and sort of pushing the responsibility away from themselves as individual consumers and onto companies and political systems, saying that if something is so bad, then why am I able to buy it? Why hasn't the system fixed it? Why is the responsibility on me to make this choice when there are organizations with a lot more power to make change in this environment? I think I'm going to stop there.
Thank you, Johanna. Why don't you sit down next to me and we will listen to our next speaker, Jimmy, who will, you have the clicker there, right? There we go.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you, Åsa, and thank you, Johanna, for your interesting presentation. My name is Jimmy Sand. I work at NIC, Nordic Information on Gender, which is a cooperation body under the Nordic Council of Ministers and the gender equality and LGBTI sector. And I will present some results from the project that we have been working on as a part of the Sustainable Living Program. And our first output was a research overview with gender analysis on sustainable on lifestyles and consumption, which was released 2 years ago. And thereafter, we compiled results from some previous projects of ours related to green jobs and the green transition last year. And now, more recently, we did a study together with Nordregio of young people's engagement in sustainability, which was released this August. And starting with the latter, since Johanna has already talked a lot about the engagement among young people, I'm not going to go into this so much. I just have this idea from a couple of years ago of Generation Z as Generation Greta, at least here in Sweden we talked about it in that way. Besides the engagement among young people on a general level, we can also see, just as for adults, patterns where more girls and young women are active in these movements than boys and young men. And a small group of young people not only uninterested but also opposing measures for sustainable development consist mainly of boys or young men, which has been seen, for example, in a study by the Swedish School Inspectorate when they have interviewed teachers and pupils and headmasters also. And in our study, with interviews and a survey of people engaged in youth organizations, we can see these patterns of more women or girls being engaged in these organizations, and specifically concerning climate change. But we also see more people studying social sciences, which are mainly women, and then other disciplines in higher education or in vocational education. So we can see some kind of interaction between gender and education, as well as other categories. For different reasons, it also seems harder to engage young people outside of cities or from minorities. And what the reasons for this, we have seen some of it, but I'm not going to go into it so much now. But as one focus group participant in this youth study put it, the lower representation of boys and young men probably has a lot to do with social norms of masculinity. And I'm not going to read this quote, but you know about big petrol-driven cars, eating meat, and also, as this participant said, we need to show alternatives for men and to encourage emotions. Which brings us to our research overview. And as have been mentioned earlier, we can see greater impact from the lifestyle patterns of men on group level compared to that of women. which to a large degree has to do with meat consumption. But studies also indicate that social norms around masculinity and femininity can explain much of this, as those men who think it's important to be viewed as real men, for example, to a greater degree eat meat. And we have also, in some cases, or many cases perhaps, feminine body ideals which promote smaller portions or lesser calories, which could be, in effect, be good for the climate, but perhaps not so healthy. So it's more complex than we can see on the group level. And as a group, men get to work by car more often than women. But a large part of this can be explained by carrying responsibilities, those who drop off and pick up children at preschool and school, plan and shop for family meals, and may also work part-time, which we know is the fact for more women than men. Also have different mobility patterns than those who only get to and from work and work full-time, and they can also work farther from home because they don't pick up or drop off children. And also, women are more willing to make behavioral changes, and in studies of households who try to be more sustainable, it is often women who are the initiators, and those cases where it's men, it is also men who, to a greater degree than other men, have taken the more caring responsibility. And from an early age, we are taught that technology is masculine. For men are more interested in investments, often of technological nature. Which brings us to our report on green jobs. And as we have seen in studies of climate policy, measures that generate jobs often generate more jobs in male-dominated sectors. We talk about green jobs in industry, but we don't as often talk about welfare work as green jobs, but it's most important for social sustainability, of course. And it also increases the burden of individuals, which we know also women take more amount of the unpaid household work. And I think I'm going to skip this. And this also I have already mentioned. And this kind of welfare and care work, which is mostly carried out by women, is also less paid. So if you want to have let's say a battery factory in Skellefteå, you also need a lot of people working in care and welfare, but those kinds of jobs aren't talked about as green jobs. So we have these norms around the gender segregated labor market also. And I think I'm just going to leave this here. It's a kind of a summary of all this as a conclusion. It's the kind of patterns of engagement related to gender and education, for example, and that the ideal of caregiving and the responsibility for care work has a lot to do with how involved we are in sustainability as well. And this, of course, affects young people as well. And we have the gender labeling of technology and care, which is very important to consider as well. I think that's all from me.
Thank you, Jimmy, so much. Johanna, Jimmy, thank you so much. You can stay there if you want, but there will be an enormous panel that's going to come and sit on your lap if you're going to stay there. So okay. We thank you so much and give them another round. That's not what's coming next. So how do I do this? So I think there's well, here we go. There we go. Perfect. Amazing. So now we are going to engage in a very great panel, which I think they are just taking up the whole backstage area. Please come up while I introduce you so we save some time. So we have Marie Nordén, who is the co-founder of Fabrik. We have, not in that order, but give them a round of applause. We have Gurkin Bakircioglu, who is climate justice and sustainable advocate. Thank you very much. Sit down, please. We have Seva Lukashenok, who is a there we are, perfect. Who is a security coordinator and a program officer and it's a long title, program officer and youth and peace and security coordinator at the YMCA of Sweden. That's the longest title so far, I think. We have Ari Sigurdarsson, who is a representative for youth participating in sustainable development at UN Student Association of Norway. And finally, we have also Amelie Du, who is a student and SGG Youth Ambassador at the UNA Sweden. I think we should just do this again. Perfect. This is a well, I think I'm going to just jump in here in the middle. Thank you very much. Perfect. Wow. I feel very empowered sitting here. Great. So I'm just going to start with Seva, if that's okay. Seva, well, we're all very engaged and passionate about youth engagement here. And I know that you're also passionate about the involvement of youth and the exclusion that otherwise happen if they're not involved. What is your opinion that can be done to ensure youth empowerment? What do you think is missing?
Of course. Well, first and foremost, hello, and nice to see so many of you still sticking around for the late part of this day. Well, I'd like to start with, why is it so important? Just a short notice, and that is because youth are today a great, huge generation. There are so many young people, and in some countries in the world, they consist, or they are the majority of the population. So if we don't include youth, if we don't not only include but have meaningful participation of young people, the processes, the decision making is more or less illegitimate. What do we have to do? Well, there's tons of different answers, and today we've heard a lot of things about involving young people, which is great to hear, but sometimes it almost becomes a cliche. Oh, it's so important, but what's happening? Not so sure. My advice is for the duty bearers, as I call them, the governments, politicians, and so on, to actually go to the experts of youth inclusion, which is a youth organization. In the world, in Sweden, wherever you are in the Nordic countries, I represent a youth organization myself, and in the sport clubs, in the choirs, in where young people are by themselves, those are the safe spaces where youth wants to go to. So instead of writing saying, oh, young people, please come and give your opinion, change it, switch it around, and go to where young people already are to ask for their opinions.
So I think that sounds great. What should they, how should that be done practically? Should they call a youth organization and say, I want to come? Or I think there is at least some representatives out there that could potentially do that.
I mean, of course, yes. Frankly, what's missing in youth organizations today, it's the resources, the financing, funding for the work that we've already been doing for hundreds of years and will continue doing, notwithstanding the situation. So yes, please reach out to us, to other spaces where young people already are, and make yourself available rather than expecting that young people will make them available for the platforms that you set up. Because quite often when big organizations like UN or when politicians invite young people, those rooms, those spaces are not safe spaces. You have to know things, and there are great young leaders who know how to do that. We've talked about Greta, for example, but then you miss out on a huge portion of youth generation that aren't, they don't know how to behave in those areas, but they are still as important.
Brilliant. And let's keep the applause coming because it's late in the afternoon. You guys have been here for the whole time. So have you guys. So it's good to keep the energy in the room. Thank you. I know that when we spoke, both you and Seva were touching on the subject of youth washing, which I thought was interesting. Basically, well, you can explain a little bit what that is. Like, let's not make me do it.
So, similar to the concept of greenwashing, which has been mentioned earlier, and which is a very important concept as well, youth washing is kind of the tokenism, the symbolism of involving young people without actually involving them properly. That means that you would invite a young person, for example, to sit on this stage, but kind of not necessarily care about their opinion or not let them actually have that space that they could have had if they would have been an older person. And I think I think there's often a willingness to involve young people, but the question you should rather ask is there a willingness to involve them properly? Is there a willingness to involve them in kind of decision-making processes when it's uncomfortable to hear their opinions, when we can actually disagree? You know, because oftentimes, like, you can involve as many people as you want, you can involve marginalized groups, but if you don't listen to what they have to say, then it is youth washing.
And what do you, how can we make sure that this doesn't happen? I mean, you mentioned like conferences like this or other organization. How can we make sure that youth really are a part, that they are really listened to and really contributing to set the agenda?
So I think I have an experience with this as well. I was myself at the UN. It's a very interesting place to be. You can learn a lot, but you can also feel very small there. And I think that's also a bit of what they're trying to do often, right? You shouldn't grow too big because this is a world, right? This is all the world leaders coming together. But I was working with the State Secretary, Björk Sandskjær, who's on development in my home country of Norway. And we had talked already, and I told her that it was so important for me that if I am to be here, I want to be here properly. I want to be here because you want me actually to be here and participate fully. And then she did one thing that I thought was so brilliant, because we had talked about that I'm kind of sick and tired of talking about or justifying my own existence in a room. And then instead of me having to do that, she did that. She talked about why I am here, why I should be here. She spent 2 out of her 5-minute speech talking about the importance of having young people there. So I freed up my time to talk about the things that I care about as well, which sustainable development is one of the core aspects that I think is so important, but I never get to actually speak about it, right? Because I oftentimes end up just speaking about why I am here, right? And why it's important that the next person after me gets to be there, right? But I want to talk about the uncomfortable topics. I want to show that I can also be an expert. I have my Nordic colleagues, youth delegates as well, there in the front row, and we've talked about this the whole trip and here in Stockholm, that we want to be experts, right? We want to talk about more than just youth participation. And I think that is one of the key takeaways, I hope really, that everyone here thinks about further. Yeah.
Getting a high five from the back of the room there. Perfect. That was really powerful. Thank you. And I really hope that you that are listening, both here and online, takes that actually with them. That's very important. Amelie, you are a UN ambassador, and you were part of the Nordic and Baltic Youth Meeting in Stockholm, right? Where you produced a youth policy statement linked to climate justice and Agenda 2030. What did this policy document involve, and what are you hoping that it will achieve?
Yes, so together with UNA Iceland, Finland, and Estonia, and Sweden, of course, we created this policy paper for climate justice, and there are 4 points that we are, or 4 demands more that we created. The first one is end use of fossil fuels, ensure the realization of human rights and meaningful participation, invest in preventive measures and necessary adaptation, recognize the unequal impact of climate change. And in this policy paper, we wanted to bring attention to youth's voices, but also make it accessible for others that are not maybe directly engaged in organizations to take part in this change, and hopefully with enough people who also wants to sign this paper, we are hoping to hand it over to the Swedish delegation that are going to COP29 that is taking place in November.
Perfect. And you, I love this. Perfect. Yeah, Emily, you also meet many fellow youth. How do you see their engagement today? We heard Johanna's presentation here before about climate engagement amongst youth and so on. Can you feel that that's true, or are you just by fellow people that actually are as passionate as you?
Yeah. Of course, when you're with your fellow UNA organizations, we are all very engaged and are motivated to change or drive change. And I think the definition of being engaged also can differ. Is it passive by just signing a policy paper, or is it going out and demonstrating? It doesn't matter as long as you're engaged. And I feel like, or if I'm allowed to speculate, that young people are interested, but I believe that you have to show young people by example. If decision makers and policymakers are not showing by examples or priorities or giving incentives for us to also contribute to the change. Yeah.
Perfect. And we have examples both here and here, so I'll move there first and then I'll jump to you. Marie, you come from Fabrik, and you are a living example, actually, that you can really make a change. Can you please tell us a little bit what you guys do?
Yeah.
It's very inspiring.
I'm from a clothing company that doesn't produce any new fabrics. We teach people how to sew on social media, mainly through our Instagram account and also through our app. And basically, we try to make it as fun as possible. We try to make it as fun as possible to have good time with clothing, that it doesn't have to be so serious, and it doesn't have to destroy the planet. You can sew from leftover, you can sew from thrifted fabrics, or you can sew from leftover fabrics from the fashion industry. Because let's face it, there is so much left from the fashion industry. We don't ever need to buy new clothes.
I'm going to come back to you, Görgen. You are also an example. You are an inspiration in social media, amongst many other things that you do. And you've been on television, and you speak in. So you're an advocate for this. So how important do you think that people like yourself are as good examples for young people to be engaged or change behaviors?
I'm still a disappointment to my dad, so.
Not to us.
Well, I don't know how to put this, but I think when you create a following, you create a cult, and I'm very. I would, if I could leave people with something, is that please unfollow influencers. I don't know what the majority of them are doing, because we have this hyper-individualistic. We have individualism in Europe, but Sweden and Norway, we are more extreme than that. So we tend to look at yoga girl. What is she eating now? Oh no, she's eating meat. Oh, maybe I should do as well. She used to be vegan. Now I should change as well. So we look to the one in the top of our social hierarchy, and we think that maybe that person knows better than me, but truth is no. And I think it's more important that we create, of course, individual actions create cultural norms, and we create new ideas through that. But the most important thing is system change. If I would to follow influencer, it would be some of the people today being very active here and trying to say that, hello, listen up, our government is under wrong path. we should do something about it, and we are worried about it. I would like to see that people follow people from Extinction Rebellion in the same way as they follow Kenza or Swedish bloggers. I don't know. So I'm very, and I would encourage people to unfollow me as well. Just like follow the news, follow science. Why do we look at people? Why do we look at the chimpanzee on the top all the time? This is very frustrating for me. Like, we are truly chimpanzees. Don't look at everyone at the top is not. They don't know what they are doing.
Well,
They do not know what they are doing. Follow science. So what I tend to do, I'm trying to compensate my bad behavior, because they even made a documentary on Swedish television about this, and I sometimes I'm like, oh no, maybe they shouldn't. It's just to make people to engage in system change instead of, don't look at what I'm eating. Yes, I'm vegan. I don't fly. Who gives a shit? Sorry for me expressing it like this, but we should instead join a movement that be radical. Of course I would love people if people choose plant-based, if they choose kidney beans instead of a kidney from an animal, that would be great. But at the same time, I think that and we need to try not to be like little polluters ourselves, so that we can demand accountability when we when we're angry at oil companies or politicians. So of course we need to lead by example, live as we learn. But the most important thing is not, what are you doing? What are you eating? What are you how are you traveling? Because we change all the time. Of course, train influencers, I love them. But it comes a day when they fly to Thailand and their followers they're like, oh no, why? I trusted you. Oh, you're disappointing to me now. I'm depressed. And then they give up hope. But I think the thing that gives me hope is the movement. Like the people that are truly into the work that demands system change.
So you speak about movement. So how do you guys think here as well? Like, how can we get more youths involved in this? You were speaking about politicians coming to maybe visit, your platform where there's choirs or basket, whatnot. How can we get the message out? These stats that we're showing that maybe they're more focused on price, for example. I know, Marie, you're obviously educating in your way, but how should we get them on board?
I think my takeaway from Johanna's presentation earlier is that even though there are big gaps between what we know and what we do, at the basis of it, I think Johanna said it, that young people still know the end goal, I would call it. They know that some companies are doing bad and some companies maybe are doing better, and they have this vision of wanting to do good. What young people are lacking right now is partnerships with the actors that may provide tools and resources to them to create and to go and to achieve that vision. And this is what I mentioned that earlier, that we need YouTubers and decision makers to come down and meet those young people. And in my movement, if going back to movements, we've tried to do small pilot projects where there is a partnership of youth who contribute with their ideas and their willingness and their actions. We have experts that would help those young people, guide them, and to act as a as we call it in Swedish, bollplank, basically a person who can say, well, this is bad, this is less good. Yep. And then the youth organization that is or has always acted as a platform for these young people to practice their voice, to practice their space. And in the best scenario, this is where a YouTuber or a decision maker comes in and makes that pilot project, that small idea maybe, that just implemented in this regional basketball hall or anywhere, to make that idea into reality and to make that idea more sustainable by providing resources or a political decision.
Someone more want to comment on this? Otherwise, I'm going to jump back to you. I saw that
can
you
I-
kind of were.
I think something that we maybe haven't touched enough on kind of also is the privilege it is to be able to choose a sustainable product or a sustainable solution. And I think, I mean, I'm now living in South Africa for the time being. And the amount of inequality that I'm witnessing there, and which we're very lucky to not have the same extreme lengths of in the Nordic countries, but that we still see, for example, with young people not having the same money to buy products that are going to be sustainable. Because oftentimes, I mean, it's a system problem, right? It's not cheaper to buy the most or the best products for this planet, right? It's gonna be cheaper for me to take a plane from Oslo to Stockholm than to take the train. It's gonna take me more time as well to take the train. So why would I choose to do something that would not benefit me, right? We're talking about rational choice. We're talking about kind of, are we smart enough to do the best thing that we could do? But it's not always about like, are we smart enough, but do we actually have the opportunity to do so, right? I don't necessarily, as a student, living on a student loan as well and having a part-time job and trying my best to make ends meet, I don't necessarily have that extra money to be able to actually choose without that having to be like then having to prioritize that and deprioritizing something else, right? We don't have unlimited funds as young people, marginalized groups don't have that, and we need to acknowledge the inherent privilege of sustainable development and kind of like, or sustainability in products and in the system as it is.
Just this whole panel is just applause. It's very good. Marie, we were speaking about the importance of price before, which has shown clearly in the survey. And we're then familiar with the opposite trends, that with the ultra fashion trends that was on the screen there. And I guess it's just easy to go online and buy a T-shirt for 10 kroners or something like that, right? How do you see it as being an entrepreneur in Norway, really trying to get this movement and advocate for something more circular or sustainable? How do you see that we should break this pattern? And can we, in some way, or can you also educate parents if you're not already doing that? What do you see?
Yeah. In terms of who we educate, I know we're talking about youths here today, but it's a fact, sewing has no age. We had a festival early September or mid-September where we had a festival just outside Oslo, and we had a sewing course for 800 people. Yeah, we sewed a shirt together, and the youngest participant, she was 9 years old, and the oldest were 87. So we have everything in between. Sewing has no age. But what we see in like the more of the structural change, what we would really like is that it's two things. Is that it gets cheaper to buy secondhand, so that, for example, we could, take away the moms or the VAT because it's already been paid, right? Take away the moms, and that would make it more incentive for us to open more of the donated clothing in Norway. Like, I think around 3% of everything we donate each year, which is like 30,000 tons of clothing, is just 3% that are opened and sold on the secondhand market. And there's a huge market there. And to see like more incentives to make the repair and secondhand market, thrive, that could really help. And to make, a secondhand first choice, which is, I think, Vestiaire or something, a secondhand collective, they have this as their slogan. It's really beautiful. And secondly, I would really love to see higher taxes on import. So everything that we ship into the country, we should take care of the shit. And if that's crap that we're bringing in, then we don't want that there. Like right now, like I said, 97% of donated clothing are just shipped abroad. And we don't know where it goes. And that's also really unfair, because we just ship it somewhere. Maybe it ends up in a desert in Ghana. And more, when these clothes come from Shein or Temu, they're too bad for the secondhand market. We don't even want them. So it's a huge problem, and we should really incentivize for a stronger secondhand market before it's too late.
I'm going to conclude this with two questions, one for you and one for you. Amelie, what do you see? You're obviously part of a Nordic, network. Like, how often do you meet, or are you in dialogue with Nordic youth?
Yes. So this far we've had a project called the Nordic 030 project, which is to show or exchange ideas between the Nordic and Baltic youth organizations. And what I see is that it's very inspiring to meet the other youth organizations, because you really see a commitment beyond national borders. And we also have a somewhat understanding that, speaking about climate justice, that our countries are prosperous enough we have the means to change and bring climate justice, in short, but we need powerful political initiatives to do so.
We need political courage. We've heard it now, and we heard it earlier today. Gergen, if you were to conclude this and send a message, what would you want to send to young people listening today?
I really don't know which message I can send, because I was one of them that thought that we were going to have Generation Greta, but we had another generation, so the kids are not all right, they are alt-right. So I don't know how to address that. I'm depressed about it, but the kids used to be cool. But they should be angry. They are now angry at the wrong things. They listen to Jordan B. Peterson, Andrew Tate. They should be angry at the right things. Focus on structural changes. They should be angry at what we are doing. Why are we destroying this rock that we are living on? That's the right thing to be angry. They should also be afraid, but not afraid of like Somalis in hijab. They should be afraid of weird policies that can actually destroy your life and your future, and it takes away your future. So I think I have no more message than I have no real call to action. The most common call to action is please choose the right ketchup. If you go to your ICA or Hemköp or Coop, you have 7 ketchups. Please choose the right one. But we should have a society where we don't promote 7 different ketchups. And I know this is not popular when I say it, but we don't need a climate minister that said that shames influencers for promoting wrong products when they are promoting the wrong products themselves. So get involved. That's my call to action. Get involved.
Thank you, Gergen. Anybody else that have a final call to action?
Start sewing.
Start sewing. Very concrete.
Feels great.
Very concrete. Yeah.
Or knitting, yeah.
Amelie, do you have a final message?
Invite young people to the political arena.
Invite young people. Perfect.
I think you wouldn't ask an adult if they want to take part in the change. Why would you ask a young people the same thing, right?
And final.
Yes, I've been thinking while sitting here that we've been compiled to one panel.
Yeah, no.
So and strange. A feedback to the organizers of this day is that we should have been on all of the other panels instead of checking us in the box here.
Good feedback, good thought. Thank you for really strong messages. Thank you for taking part and really enlightening us, and also sending important messages back to people that are going to take them hopefully back to their workplaces tomorrow. All right. Thank you so much, all of you. Give them a massive round of applause. Thank you very much.